This whole transfer saga with Miguel Almiron going to the Premier League has been so interesting that I just kind of had to make a video about this. I kind of really want to talk about what has happened in these last 3 months and actually even go all the way back in 2016 because, believe it or not, back in 2016, that was actually when there was actually rumor that Almiron was actually going to the Premier League, and that was back when he was with Linus and he was playing in Argentina. That he was actually rumored to join Arsenal before ultimately joining Atlanta United and joining the expansion team in 2017. And by the way, all these news that I basically put on the board, these are pretty much all from the past article on MLSsoccer.com, except when we get to January 8th, and this is where the cutoff line, where that is been the last news that we have heard about Miguel Almiron and his transfer to the Premier League on MLSsoccer.com, and the rest of these are just other news articles that I found in the last couple of weeks. But believe it or not, all the way back in December, Miguel Almiron, while he was with Linus, was actually rumored that he was going to join Arsenal, and that Arsenal did offer that club a couple of $1 million to basically get Almiron, but Almiron, of course, turned it down. Instead, he decided to join the expansion team that is Atlanta United. And then fast forward about 2 years later, on October 5th, this is when the first news article that I have seen on MLSsoccer.com that talk about how Almiron was going to be going to Europe and that he will be leaving Atlanta United. Although, to be fair, there has been a lot of talks that he was going to be leaving Atlanta United before this article was been published. A lot of people said that he was going to Arsenal, which is why I also said that Arsenal was leading the race, because that was the club that everybody was talking about, how Almiron was potentially going to be joining that club. And then 6 days later, Darren Eales, the president of Atlanta United, says that he wants 3 times the 11 million amount that was rumored to get Almiron. So there was actually a lot of report that I think it was Arsenal that was going to be offering 11 million to Atlanta United for Almiron's service, but the president of Atlanta United, Darren Eales, says that no, we don't want him. We're not letting him go for 11 million. We want 33 million for him. We're obviously not going to let him go with such a cheap amount of money, which makes sense because, at that time, Miguel Almiron was considered probably the best player in the league that is not named Joseph Martinez, and probably he was the most important player of that team. And you're not going to let your most important player go with such a cheap amount of fees. And, for 11 million, even though during this time it's still an outrageous amount of money to let go someone to join Europe, because, in MLS, even though 11 million doesn't sound that much, looking at some of the previous deal that we had in MLS, that is definitely a lot of money to let go of a player and joining a club in Europe. But apparently Atlanta United didn't want to do that. And then heading into October 26th, that's when Tottenham decided to join in the Almiron sweepstake with a 25 million bid. So this was actually the first time where we actually have a club that is not named Arsenal decided to pursue Almiron to basically get him from Atlanta United. Tottenham was interested in trying to get him, and later in this video, I will of course mention Tottenham again of how they are looking to try to get Almiron again. But then heading into November 13th, Almiron agent actually said that he wants his client to play in Europe, and this probably just tells us and kind of confirms us that Almiron is going to be leaving Atlanta United in the offseason, and that he, of course, will be going to Europe. And then heading into December, that was, I believe, just came off of the MLS Cup final, where he, of course, won MLS Cup with Atlanta United. And he says that he will be back with Atlanta during the preseason. And at this time, a lot of people didn't believe in this because, they thought he would be leaving before the preseason actually begin. And the fact that, the way that he's just saying this is just kind of please the fans a little bit about how, I'm still kind of loyal to the club, and that I am not really just going to, despite all those rumors that's been around, revolving around the news that he was going to be leaving to the Premier League and joining teams like Arsenal, Tottenham, and then later Newcastle. He wants to kind of stay with Atlanta for a short-term period. And then 3 days later, there was a big rumor that Almiron to Newcastle is close to being done. And this is really when we all thought that this was it, and that this was really the last kind of news that we're going to be hearing about Almiron before there's going to be a news that talk about how Newcastle has completed the transfer of Miguel Almiron, and they will tell us how much they paid him. Although we all know that it is going to be a record amount of fees. I think it was probably around the 20 million range that it was reported that they were going to pay him, and everybody thought that that news was going to come in the next couple of days. But that's when things took a big kind of twist in the tail, and right on the last day of 2018, on New Year's Eve, that's when there was an article that says that Newcastle was out of the running to sign Miguel Almiron. And this article really shocked everybody, and certainly a lot of people thought that how in the world did Newcastle decide to turn the deal down when they were so close to signing him just a couple of weeks ago? Well, that's when I, of course, will talk about that a little bit later in this video. And actually, probably about 2 minutes, I'll talk about what happened. But before that, on New Year's Day, Real Betis were rumored to get Almiron, and Real Betis to this day is still the only club outside of the Premier League that is interested in Almiron. And this is only the only news that I can found that Real Betis was actually interested in this player. Ever since that report, there has been no news that talk about Real Betis or any other club that is outside the Premier League are actually interested in Miguel Almiron. And then fast forward 7 days later, going back to what I talked about on New Year's Eve of how in the world did Newcastle all of a sudden decided to not sign Miguel Almiron. Well, that's because they reject to sign Almiron because of the wage expectation. Apparently Almiron want a big amount of wage. I think it was like 100k or about 125k that he want to get, and Newcastle just flat out says, no, we are not going to offer you 100k. We're not going to offer you that much money. I mean, we know you're a very good player, and we know you could potentially make a big impact to our team and maybe even save our team from getting relegated this season, but we're not going to give you that amount of money to you. And knowing Newcastle, and if you're a Newcastle fan, you will know how frustrated that this must feel. And Newcastle is kind of a team that are just, first of all, they are owned by Mike Ashley, which is one of the most hated owner in the Premier League. And secondly, they just are not willing to spend. They don't usually spend a lot of money on players, and usually don't. There's been just so many reports this year that they are not giving the money for Rafa Benitez to spend to try to improve his team, which is also the reason why Rafa Benitez are just so pissed right now, and he's on the cusp of actually leaving Newcastle United. And there was even like a report that he was actually going to leave Newcastle United and that he is going to quit that job if they are not going to get Miguel Almiron in this winter transfer window. So that's why, Newcastle decided to reject this. Well, actually, that's not the reason, but what I'm kind of saying is that Newcastle kind of do things a little bit, in terms of their transfer policy, is kind of a little bit difficult, as I think that probably might be the word to describe, but not in a good way, okay? So, after that, in January 14, Almiron, of course, were report that he actually returned to Atlanta United and that he was actually in the training camp. And this, of course, according to ProSoccerUSA.com, and that pretty much just fulfilled his promise of what he said back in December 9th, where he said that he will be back with Atlanta United in the preseason. And look at that. On the 14th of January, he actually did return in the preseason, which kind of surprised a lot of people because a lot of people thought that he would be with Newcastle United by now. And then 9 days later, Miguel Almiron is likely to leave Atlanta United in the summer with Newcastle United. That, of course, is according to the Express. And there's obviously a lot of talks that could potentially happen. And if that does happen, then yeah, Atlanta's kind of having a little bit of an issue right now because, if Miguel Almiron is going to be staying with Atlanta at least until the summer transfer window, then now they have 4 DPs in their roster because remember, just a couple of days ago, and this is a little bit of a spoilers to tomorrow's video when I talk about the news of the week, Pity Martinez is now with Atlanta United and that he was supposed to be the replacement for Almiron. And now all of a sudden, you have Almiron and Pity Martinez in the same team, and you also have Joseph Martinez as your third DP. And now the fourth DP that you have is Ezekiel Barco. And I've been hearing there's a lot of rumor that Barco is potentially going to be the guy that will actually be loaned out by Atlanta United and that they're going to get rid of him as a DP spot, which is not a bad idea because Barco, ever since he has arrived at Atlanta, he definitely does not fulfill what Atlanta was hoping he would be, or at least fulfill anywhere close to the record amount of transfer fee that he arrived at Atlanta for. But at the same time, it's still not ideal, the fact that they decided to loan Barco to somewhere, and they don't know who they're going to loan it to at the first place. There's been no rumor that talks about any club that is interested in trying to loan for Barco. I'm pretty sure a lot of MLS team might be in interest in that, although I'm also pretty sure that it's going to cost even with a loan or even like a trade, it's going to cost a lot of general allocation money and TAM money in order for Atlanta to basically accept the deal for another team in MLS to get Barco. So most likely that's not going to happen. But yeah, moving forward to the next day, Tottenham, they are back linking with Miguel Almiron, and they said that they were going to get him for a total of $23 million. And like what I said earlier in the video, how I said that Tottenham was going to be back in the picture, well, there you have it. They're back in the picture in this news. And by the way, this is according to TalkSports. And I think the reason why Tottenham wants to get Almiron is because Tottenham has been kind of crippled with injury. Obviously, Harry Kane is injured. Dele Alli also injured. And basically, their front three is just injured right now, and that they really kind of need Almiron to maybe try to plug the hole of that front three that they have for a short term. And at least he will be in that team for a short term before they have some of their bigger star returning in that team. But certainly Tottenham are linking with Almiron and wants him to join their team. And then the last news that I'm going to be talking about in this Miguel Almiron transfer timeline is just yesterday, where Sky Sports actually report that Miguel Almiron transfer to Newcastle will happen in the January transfer window. So yeah, there you go. That is pretty much the transfer timeline about Miguel Almiron. And obviously, we're going to probably get more kind of news and more kind of talks and about what's going to be happening with Miguel Almiron, and that will he actually be coming back to Atlanta United at least for the first half of the season? And if that is the case, then that I think is kind of good news for Atlanta, because imagine having Almiron, Petty Martinez, and Joseph Martinez as your front three coming into the CONCACAF Champions League and into MLS. Boy, that is going to be the most sexiest and probably the best front three we have ever seen in league history, and they are just going to absolutely destroying team. But I'm pretty sure that Atlanta, they kind of felt like, since we've been linked with Almiron going to Europe, and since that we want to have this money by the end of the off season, we want to make sure this deal gets done and that we don't have to, go to plan B, which is just loan out Ezekiel Barco to somewhere else. And, that is going to be the plan B that we're going to use. So, yeah, we'll see in these upcoming days whether or not if Almiron would eventually get sold, and if there is a news that confirms that Miguel Almiron is going to the Premier League or even going to Newcastle, I will immediately report on that. I'm not even going to wait for the news of the week to actually report it. I'm actually just going to do an individual video on that. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.